It was May 1915, and finally the roads were dry and hard. With picnic hampers and children, the families went out into the green and gently rolling hills of Marin. On this fine day, many of the vehicles of West Marin were paraded in front of the new Union High School at Tamales. The auto was still rare and was used mostly for amusement. In 1915, common automobiles cost between $600 and $5,000. After being laid up most of the winter, the fine days of spring provided the chance to drive for pleasure. Rather fancy starched cotton or linen clothes were worn to picnics. Parasols kept the effects of the sun from the ladies' faces. Movies were showing ordinary people. Maybe they promised immortality in a way. These cameramen set out to film brief scenes of Marin youth at work, at school, and at play. Possibly to relax the children, they themselves were filmed.
Maybe for the movie cameramen, the children used horses to collect cows for the morning milking. From the time of the earliest Spanish settlement, the lands of Marin were used for ranching and dairying. Most rural children had considerable farm responsibilities before the school day. After the tedious labor of milking, the raw milk was carried to the dairy. Eggs added greatly to the farm income. Butter was churned from cream separated from the fresh milk. This sort of human-powered rotary churn replaced the traditional plunger churn. The cream separator worked by spinning the fresh milk, rapidly causing the cream, which is lighter, to rise and flow out of the machine. One last chore was refilling the wood bunkers. On dairy farms, considerable fuel was needed for boiling water to sterilize dairy equipment in addition to hot water for normal cooking and washing. Hog racing also supplemented farm income. Swines could be turned out much of the year to forage in open country. Pigs could also turn garbage into meat.
Some students may have ridden horseback. Most lived within a few miles of the school and walked each way or maybe rode 4 on a mule.
The cameramen filmed at a few of over 60 of the county's schools. Typical of the rural schools nearly anywhere was the Garcia and Olima school, named for early land grants. The cast iron bell was rung. The students, probably dressed in their best clothing for the movie making, were gathered into lines. Until quite recently, most public schools divided the classroom by sex. It was customary for the girls to enter first and take their seats on their side of the room. Then the boys were allowed in and the day began. The desks were iron-framed and bolted in rows to the floor. Every few miles among the live oaks of Marin were small schools like Burdell near Novato, which stood until a few years ago, or Dixie School, which has been preserved near Marinwood, or very handsome buildings like Ross Landing, with its stained glass and fine woodwork. The office of the County Superintendent of Schools was in the courthouse in San Rafael.
Southern Marin was much less rural than West Marin and had extensive passenger train and ferry boat service. Many high school students rode the Northwestern Pacific Railroad trains to Tamalpais High School and to San Rafael High School. In the mornings, the Northwest Pacific Railroad made up special 3-car school trains for these runs. Part of the railway was electric-powered. The electric trains ran from Sausalito to San Rafael by way of Mill Valley, Corte Madera, Larkspur, and San Anselmo. The 3-car trains carried a maximum of 150 persons. The body of water in the background is Richardson's Bay. Steam trains crossed it on a wooden trestle.
Built in 1911 and overshadowed by Mount Tamalpais, the high school had 14 teachers and a fairly diverse curriculum for the times. The standard academic courses included English grammar, American history, geography, Latin, Greek, algebra, and geometry. There were also trade courses. The only surviving movie film of the interior of Tamalpais High School are these shots of the wood shop and the print shop. They are very clear because they had rooms with large bright windows. The printing press required each page to be placed by hand at exactly the right moment. If the student feeding in paper was at all inattentive, his fingers might be crushed. Physical education classes often met outside, although there was a gymnasium built on a barge that had been floated near the main building during a flood tide. These girls wore the typical midi blouses and bloomer pants that were popular throughout the nation for more than 50 years.
One Mill Valley elementary school was called Summit Elementary School. It had 4 teachers and an annual budget of $1,100 in 1915. Probably, these playground scenes were specially organized to place as many people as possible in front of the camera. At Tamalpais Park School near the original sawmill in Mill Valley, students carefully performed well-rehearsed unison drills and Indian club exercises. Behind the dancers may be seen the remains of the old sawmill dating from 1871. The site, just off Miller Avenue, is much the same today. The children at Park School in Mill Valley appear to be excited about being in the movies. After a morning of phonics, spelling, and arithmetic, the elementary children were ready for some games, but even these were tightly structured.
In 1915, Sausalito was a very small town with 2 wooden schools, the one visible here being Eastland School. Richardson's Bay is in the background. For a bit of variety, a water trip was arranged and the children in their best cotton clothes boarded a motor launch. Life jackets and other safety precautions were not in practice, but nothing serious occurred. With great care, the children danced around the maypole in a ritual at least as old as the Celts of Great Britain. A little less structured was sliding downhill on pieces of linoleum.
Compared to the other public schools, Ross probably had the most elaborate exterior. The building shown here was a private home being used temporarily as a school building. The people of the nation and of Marin were well aware of the likelihood of entering World War I. Many of the school exercises involved military drills such as these small boys demonstrating an exercise known as the physical drill under arms.
In Kempville, this school stood near the present College of Marin campus. In 1915, it had 5 teachers and an elaborate playground apparatus. A few children demonstrated fashions of the times. The clothes were usually cotton or linen and required extensive ironing.
At Larkspur, a vigorous tug-of-war happens at the beginning of recess. The tradition of the maypole apparently was preserved in the elementary schools, but now has disappeared altogether. In all this intense activity can be seen a huge multi-person swing in the trees and typical playground games. They played in open fields with Mount Tamalpais and the strong winds of spring blowing the grasses.
The San Anselmo School building was typical of the larger elementary schools. It was constructed of wood, and later building safety laws caused it to be replaced with a more fireproof structure. Some of the children from San Anselmo School celebrated both spring and their movie debut with a smoky fire and a gypsy dance.
During recess, smaller children had tiny garden plots to tend.
This large preparatory school and military academy was located in San Rafael on Mission Street. Part of the buildings and fields remain as the property of the Marin Academy. Founded in 1891 by Dr. Arthur Crosby, a Presbyterian minister, the Mount Tamalpais Military Academy remained in operation until 1924, when it was sold and reorganized as the San Rafael Military Academy.
The academy had a concrete pool among its many facilities. Notice the use of a jumping platform in conjunction with the springboard.
Each spring there was a visitor's day for the cadets to display the campus and their physical skills. Their parents and friends gathered under a long wooden shelter on the edge of the drill field.
The dress uniforms of the Mount Tamalpais Military Academy resembled the dress West Point uniform. The youngest cadets, about 10 years old, demonstrate their mastery of the manual of arms as Dr. Crosby, the founder of the academy, looks on. Dr. Crosby died 7 months after this Visitor's Day of 1915 and was paid many posthumous tributes. At this time, tuition was $250 to $350 per half year for resident students. The academic curriculum was a rigorous combination of mathematics, Greek, Latin, German, French, chemistry, spelling, Bible study, and military sciences.
By 1915, the Great War in Europe had already demonstrated that the effective military use of horse cavalry was over. The academy offered training and maintained a stable, but in Europe, men on horses were not a match for barbed wire, trench warfare, and most disastrous of all, the machine guns. The tradition of cavalry descended from the Civil War through the Indian Wars and the Spanish-American War, and some cavalry training was customary at most military academies.
Synchronous calisthenics were widely popular in education of the time, and especially in military training. Bayonet practice was more relevant to trench warfare than cavalry charges. These rubber bayonets of 1915 very likely were exchanged for steel by 1917 when the United States entered the war. 204 graduates of the Mount Tamalpais Military Academy served in the First World War. Basic academic and military training started on these fields became the basis for later duty on the battlefields and in the skies of Europe. Most served as enlisted men. Some were officers. A surprising proportion trained as flyers. Several of these men were injured in training crashes. Some served with naval units also. At the time the United States entered the war, there were very few persons with any military experience. Boys with military school backgrounds were sought because they had slightly greater experience than other raw recruits.
This day in 1915, older students demonstrated proficiency with light artillery pieces. Light field artillery was still being used, although in Europe at this time the stalemate of trench warfare encouraged the use of enormous siege guns. The ability to maneuver field pieces involved hitching and unhitching guns from the ammunition-carrying caissons, positioning them, firing, and rehitching to move to a new position. These are Spanish-American War Hotchkiss field rifles that the government loaned to the academy. They replaced two very heavy Civil War cannons. After the second academy was closed in 1970, they were returned to the Presidio. The Mount Tamalpais Military Academy is gone, but its grounds and some buildings can still be viewed on Mission Street in San Rafael.
Fairfax students were waiting to have an outing on the funicular railroad. This railway, a very unusual system of transport, was pulled by a cable and was built to help promote real estate by lifting prospective buyers from the valley floor to lots not yet served by roads. It was 1,000 feet long and rose vertically 276 feet.
By 1915, San Rafael had several elementary schools. This was the B Street Elementary School, another tall wooden building that had to be replaced after 60 years of service.
The San Rafael High School stood on E Street between 3rd and 4th Street, where the present San Rafael Schools Administration Building is located. A new school replaced it in 1924. Like Tamalpais High School, San Rafael had the usual academic and trade courses. It also had an art class, which in May 1915 went on a field trip to the nearby open areas for sketching and painting. Midi blouses and bloomers were the standard physical education costumes of the era. In 1915, San Rafael High had 216 students and 13 faculty and an annual budget of $19,000. Home economics classes had the benefit of the latest in treadle sewing machines.
The school employed 5 teachers and had 140 students. Novato students were also practicing marching and military-style drills. The idea of entering World War I was becoming quite widespread in the U.S. Educational theory of the times claimed that physical training and rhythm practice improved academic achievement in the students.
Black Point was a very small school serving a relatively isolated area. Basic elementary subjects were taught, and of course in the spring they had a maypole dance.
In West Marin, the population was very sparse. Inverness School served a wide area around Tamales Bay, having 3 teachers and 125 students.
By 1918, one of the first school buses in the nation was bringing students to Union High School in Tamales.
Unlike most schools in the nation, the schools in West Marin had the beaches of the Pacific Ocean and its bays for playgrounds.
On the San Francisco side of Marin County were Belvedere and Tiburon schools. In the background is Belvedere Island and its lagoon. A wooden bridge connected the island to the peninsula. This school, like most others, had regular flag ceremonies at the end of each school day.
Dismissal of class did not necessarily end the day for all young people. Some students, maybe to be helpful or maybe as punishment, cleaned up the schoolyard.
Some of the older students might have played a few sets of tennis, which was a great national rage even then.
The cameramen filmed the opening of a large indoor swimming pool called San Rafael Baths. It was located near the corner of Lincoln and 3rd Street. Eventually, the building had its pools drained and became a kerosene heater factory. In 1948, some smoldering trash set the building afire, totally destroying it.
At any time for anyone, there were free recreations like rock sliding or fishing, or just playing in the bay. It was a time not so long past, not long ago at all.